Hello and welcome to the Ohio Arts Council's Rife Gallery. This is the DIY hands-on art making workshop for the exhibition, All We Cannot Forget, with artist Jessica Pinsky. Today, we're going to explore weaving techniques as an extension of the exhibition. We'll hear first from the artist, then gather materials and walk through the project step by step. There will be dedicated pause points in the video, but please work at your own pace and use the video as you need. All right, welcome, Jessica.
Hi, Kat. Thank you so much for having me, Rife Gallery. I am so excited to be here with all of you and teach you a little bit about tapestry weaving so we can get into it. So tapestry is the way that I define it when I'm teaching weaving is a discontinuous weft. So weaving consists of threads that are going in two different directions, vertically and held under tension. That's called the warp. And then the yarns or materials that go horizontally, which is called the weft. So you can see here in this example that the colors kind of start and stop, and that's one of the major characteristics of tapestry weaving. This is a really cool weaving by artist Romy Anderson also. And here on this slide is just some examples of what I consider to be really innovative and fun examples of what contemporary tapestry has in the landscape of visual art today. So feel free to like screenshot this and Google the names of these artists at a later time. But there's just so many wonderful and diverse approaches to this very long standing tradition of tapestry weaving. So this is, again, not a historical view. It's a real snapshot of contemporary landscape of tapestry. And here's another one. So both of these slides, I think, are really great resources, and all of these names deserve their own Google search. All right, so we're going to get into weaving on a loom. And in the case of our workshop at Rife, we use these really cool little bracelet looms. And you can buy these on Amazon or in your local craft store. There's probably some version of this, but truly you don't need any materials to get started. You can use a piece of cardboard and you can make little snips on the top and the bottom of that rectangle, and you can start weaving right away. You can do this as a great way to approach tapestry with children, and it's honestly going to give you a great result no matter your age or experience level. But in this case, in these pictures, you'll see this little kind of wooden loom. Then we have any yarn that you like. For warp, we like to use something that's not very stretchy. So something that holds its firmness, some tape, some scissors. And then on top of that little loom, it's hard to kind of see in this picture, there's a tapestry needle with a big eye so that you can fit your chunky yarn in through it. And then that cute little comb is not necessary, but it is cute. Beads are extra too, just to like add that some special something to your project. And that's it. So you can see that we're recommending a specific kind of yarn. You can pause here to gather your materials. And when you're all ready, then you can kind of keep going with the video, and let's get started weaving. Okay, here is the process. So we start by preparing our warp around the loom. And remember, I said that the warp is something that's held under tension. And so we are just going to place a piece of painter's tape or masking tape on the back side of the loom in the top upper left hand or right hand corner. And that just keeps the yarn in place so that you can wrap up and down. So it might look like you're wrapping all the way around the cardboard, but I would recommend kind of going up to the top and then going just around the tiny little notch and then back down. So your warps are going up and down just on the front side of your loom. This will make it easier for you to take the project off at the end. And And then, oh yeah, and to start, you want to make sure you measure about 3 or 4 arm lengths, but this really depends on the size of your loom. So these looms are really little. Again, they're for bracelets, but if you have a bigger loom, you're obviously going to need more warp yarn. So make sure you start with maybe your entire skein or your entire cone of that. And then you're kind of ready to get started. So once your warp is all kind of tight, and you'll cut it at the end and tape it on the back at the other end at the very bottom left-hand corner. So on opposite corners. So when you're weaving, the basic principle of weaving is really just going under, over, under, over. And tapestry weaving is really taking this unbelievably basic step and kind of repeating it over and over again. This makes tapestry weaving like an extremely relaxing and wonderful activity because it really, really emphasizes that repetition. So you're going to do your very first row by threading up your needle. So let's see what's on the next slide together. All right. So here it gives you a really great sort of graphic of the very first introductory stitches and that you're going to attempt on your loom. So once the warp is fully intact and you've threaded up your needle with whatever yarn you like, literally it could be anything, then you're going to actually start to weave. So this twining process on the left of my screen, that is really great if you find that your warp threads are close together and you can't tell which the order is, like they're kind of twisting maybe. The twining really separates everything and makes sure that it stays where it's supposed to be and you can tell the order of your warp threads. If you can already tell the order of your warp threads, just skip that part. Then you can go on to plain weave, and you can see if you start in the bottom left, like you're reading a American English book, you're going to go under the first thread and over the second thread, under the first, all the way across from left to right of your weaving. Then you're going to make a U-turn and go back the other direction, going on top of and under the opposite threads that you did in the first pass. So that is the whole general process. It's really simple, and you can just do this stitch for the entire length of your weaving, and you will end up with a really beautiful and satisfying project. But there are some more stitches we can explore in the following slides. So if you want to practice this, go ahead and do that and pause, and then we can keep going with some more complicated stitches. So here's some examples of what that plain weave stitch looks like. So I love this picture just because you can see the warp and the weft really evenly. That is a wonderful way of starting out, of just trying to get that balance between warp and weft. That's on the picture to my left. The picture to my right, that's more traditional tapestry, where the weft yarns actually smush down on top of the warps so much that you cannot see the warp anymore. And that is more characteristic of tapestry weaving. So you hear people saying the word tapestry all the time, and using it in different ways. This is just my definition. So you might hear it used differently in another space. I love this also because it has the added beads with the weft. So this is as the needle goes through, anywhere you want to bead, before you put the needle back through to wrap around the next warp thread, just add on your bead and keep going. And then those beads get kind of locked into the face of the weaving, and they can create a really extra additional design. And then I'll also note that on the right-hand photo, we've also switched colors in our weft. So you can see a couple rows back and forth of green, then it switches to a variegated color and then back to green again. You can do that at your total will. That one strategy is to leave like a 6-inch tail to the left or the right when you start or end a new color. And then at the very end, after you've taken your weaving off of the loom, you'll thread that needle again and just sew in those loose ends. So don't worry about the ends. It's going to look a little messy as you're going, and at the end we can clean that up. So think about that as you're going, and we'll keep going with the video, but again, pause anywhere you need. All right, so this is a couple more graphics that are just going to demonstrate that striping idea a little bit more. So here is this horizontal stripes. You saw that in the last picture, going a couple rows back and forth with one color, cutting, leaving the 6-inch tail, and then going back with the other color. This one I really love. It's a little bit, it gives you a little bit of a fancier effect. And it could help to have 2 needles in this case, or just kind of switching every row, because you're going to do one color going one way and another color going another way, and you're switching every other row. So you can see if you have 2 needles, that might go a little faster. No problem if you have to switch needles, or if you want to kind of just use your fingers and kind of push it under and over, that's also fine too. But the idea is that you're alternating with these colors every other, and when they smush down, they actually create vertical stripes. So here is an example of what that looks like. And it's really cool. It's really fun to play with different effect yarns. Like you could have a stripe that's shiny and a stripe that's fuzzy, or a stripe that's really light, or a stripe that's really dark. And I would encourage you to really utilize contrast with this method. And then, of course, people also think about tapestry, and they think about, big color blocks or abstract compositions, or even something pictorial or representational. And you can do that with tapestry because it's really free formed. You're not really relying on the structure of the grid as you would on a floor loom, for example. You get to be really free form with it and go wherever you feel like going with your needle and thread. So with that said, you might have blocks of color that need to sit next to each other on the face of your weaving as part of your design. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how those 2 colors can meet, how they can connect, and some just different methods for making that possible. So this one is called dovetail, and you can see in the graphic that both the black and the white sections are wrapping around the same warp thread. So this is just one method of having 2 colors sit next to each other. And this is going to create like a pretty straight defining line between one block and the next. And then this graphic is illustrating what's called a slit tapestry method. So you still have the 2 blocks next to each other, but this time the right block is wrapping around its own warp thread and the left block is wrapping around its own warp thread. And what happens at the end, this does is actually create a slit in the middle of your weaving. So this is just a total preferential design element. You might want to have a slit for some reason. Think like opening in a bag or pocket. You could think about like buttonholes in this way. There's a lot of applications for that technique, but it's just good to know that you can utilize one or the other. And there's even another that I can show you next. Here's just an example of what that looks like. So the turquoise block is sitting next to the navy blue block, and they're actually divided, like you could poke your finger right through the middle. So this next technique is going to allow for that same concept of one color sitting next to the other on the face of the weaving. But this time you're using a method called hatching, which is that every time you go up every row, the connector is going to alternate on one warp thread and then back to the other from block A, and then back to block B, and then back to block A again. So the reason that you might want to utilize this method versus the dovetail method from a few slides ago, when two colors are wrapping around the same warp thread as in the dovetail method, you might notice some bulking or bunching on that warp thread, which is going to create like maybe some puckering or some dimension in that middle thread where the warps or there are double the amount of weft yarns touching that warp. But on this one, they're alternating back and forth so that your end result is going to lay much flatter. So again, there's just going to be reasons and scenarios where you might want to utilize one or the other. There's no right way or wrong way. It's just that one might be better for your particular project. It's nice to have all of the methods at your fingertips. And so then lastly, just to kind of explore more about the idea of creating pictorial or representational imagery on the face of your tapestry weaving, we have a technique called eccentric weft. So this is where you're just not following a block or a geometric shape at all, where you're going to still build from the bottom up in your weaving, but you're really going to go in any direction that you want. And then you can come back from the top to the bottom. So the white threads in this graphic are kind of representing the yarn starting at the bottom and working up. And then the gray yarn is kind of representing what can happen working from the top down. So you can build up a section a little bit on the side, come back and build up on the other side, come back and fill in the middle. And you don't, again, the emphasis here is that you're not restricted to staying in the grid. So you don't have to go all the way across one way and then all the way across the other way. You can go up in any direction. And I would encourage you to challenge yourself to try it, because it really is a process that this is the only place in weaving where you can get really organic results like that. On the floor loom, again, you're really restricted to the grid. Of course, if you look at my work, especially in the show and the rife, my entire life's mission is to try to avoid that rule on the floor loom. And I have a lot of fun with that. But for the most part, this is the way to get those results. So you can kind of see a couple, this is an image of some of those processes that I just described. So on top of the slit, you can see a bit of the hatching going back and forth. And that's that. So once you are all the way finished and you have worked your warp all the way to the top, so you've like basically run out of space, you don't have any more room on the top of your loom anymore, you get to be done. That's the end of your project. So it kind of depends on how you started. If you wrapped your warp all the way around your loom so that you were making a circle front and back, you can make a cut through the back. And then you're going to just lift that whole weaving off the loom. You're going to want to tie knots on the top and the bottom. And you can think about these as kind of like fringe knots. And this picture is showing the knots kind of a few inches down from the bottom. But if you wanted to make that knot touch and butt up exactly to the last or first weft, then that will really lock the weaving in place. So that's a really, on the green and yellow example on the right, you can see those knots a little bit higher, and then it kind of like locks your weft yarns into place. If you only have your warp looped on the face of your weaving, you will only have to make a cut on either the top or the bottom, and then the loops themselves will act as one of the barriers of either the top or the bottom, and then you'll only have to do those knots or fringe or some other kind of tying or sewing method on one side. So that is it. I hope that this was informative and that it encourages everyone to just try it. Every single time you start a new project, it can be clunky in the beginning, but I encourage you to just do it and then do it again and again. And hopefully you'll love weaving. And for more resources and for anybody who's going to be visiting the Cleveland area, I run a nonprofit called Praxis Fiber Workshop where we offer classes. You can stop by and we are happy to show you in person any of these processes. So thanks for watching.
That's so great. Yeah, so these are images from our workshop, and then the next slide is actually contact information for Praxis. One more, I think. There it is. So if you love Jessica's work, you can get more of it by following this. You can also check out Praxis in Cleveland, as she mentioned. Thank you again for joining us for this DIY hands-on art making workshop led by Jessica Pinsky as a part of our programming for the All We Cannot Forget exhibition. A special thank you to Jessica for the generosity of her time and talent, to our curator, Shar Norman, as well as to the Ohio Arts Council's board, the Ohio legislature, and the governor, all who support the Ohio Arts Council, this great space, and of course, Ohio artists. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.